Well, the LA fires have affected so many people, and as we dig through the aftermath as a community here in Los Angeles, whether you're in the Palisades, whether you're in Altadena with the Eaton fire, or the other fires that wreaked havoc on the city this last month, there is a lot of conjecture going around on what to do, how to rebuild our communities, and what happens next. Today, we're going to reflect on the collective trauma that a lot of these communities have endured during the aftermath and during the fires themselves. And today, joining me is traumatologist Elizabeth Rona. She was also evacuated for 10 days, and she is here to join the program. I'm Collier Landry. Let's get into it.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in which Dr. John Boyle is accused of killing his wife, Maureen.
The boy confidently told the jury it was his decision to testify against his father.
I heard a scream. I heard a thud. It's about this loud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
I decided at an early age that our trauma should not be what defines us. It's what we choose to do with it that does. I'm here to share my unique perspective on true crime, mental health, society, and popular culture, and always with a slight sense of humor. I'm Collier Landry, and welcome to my show. Live from Santa Monica, California, Mover Nation, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Wherever you may be and however you may be watching or listening, thanks for making me a part of your day. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Elizabeth Rona. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a traumatologist. And she's going to talk to us about the experiences that Angelenos are facing right now as we rebuild our community. Look, as you guys know, you see my posts. I'm always down at the beach, working out, running on the bike path here in Santa Monica, which leads into the Palisades. And I've shared many times the long line of cars that are backed up and the FEMA response area and the Red Cross doing great work there to support the citizens over here on the west side. I have not been a part of anything that's going on the east side because I'm a west sider nowadays. Elizabeth Rona is going to share with me about her story about the evacuations and what she's doing to help heal the community as well. She comes to us from Dr. Angel Iskovich, who joined the program last week, who is a fantastic guest. And as you guys know, he wrote the book, The Art of Routine, and he recommended Elizabeth. And I'm so grateful to have her on the program. Without further ado, please welcome to the program, Elizabeth Rona.
Hi, Collier.
How are you?
Good. I really like your intro, your theme. It's Aldous Huxley said, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. That's
what I like to think. That's always been my mantra, if you will, or my ether, because I just, you're dealt a certain hand, and I think society looks at you in a certain way of whether or not you're going to make it. And look, the odds are often stacked against you. And, through, I guess, support of my mother who instilled all these values in me as a child. And then obviously I was adopted later on in life, and that family supporting me in my community, I was able to I was able to navigate the waters. And, look, I'm far from perfect, but I'm a regular guy, I like to think. And I've done my best to navigate. So I'm glad you appreciate that. And that's what Mover Nation is here to appreciate.
You made it. You survived. And that's when we can ask ourselves that.
Yeah.
In any trauma work. And there are lots of different kinds of traumas. There's shock trauma, there's medical traumas, there's attachment traumas, in relational, which I would think you would fall under.
I definitely have my issues with that.
We all do to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's really when when you first realize that you're going to be okay, that's when the healing begins.
Yeah.
And in Los Angeles with the fires, we're not there yet. And I would say we collectively, but some people have landed apartments to find a place to live. Some have not. And then there's a cleanup. And people are feeling displaced still because they don't feel safe returning to their neighborhoods because it's so toxic. And, for example, the Palisades, and I was evacuated for 10 days. It was touch and go. It sort of edged on where I live. So we were gone, but there was no power for weeks. And when we returned, the air quality was so bad that it felt like we're still in danger, not of fire, but of getting sick. And so people are in different stages of still processing what happened. And when for example, I went to a restaurant, this restaurant owner and his wife and friends were all sitting there having dinner later in the day. And they, to me, as a traumatologist, all looked dazed, like they just lost their home of 50 years, where their kids and grandkids were raised, gone. And they live in Malibu. So this was there's not their first rodeo.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's been so much in Malibu, even back in December.
Yeah. And they were just, we were all like, when I saw them, I felt what they felt. And we are in a collective trauma right now, active. And personally, I saw my friend's backyard. She sent a photo of it and I burst into tears. Just like a visual reminder of the devastation and the loss, and then I think about the work it is to rebuild. Working with the government and the cleanup, do it, and I burst into tears because I thought of the people with horses, for example. I'm listing people that I know personally and their struggles. People with horses, people with disabled kids, people with, never mind the pets and the dogs that were in the hotel where I was staying. Children who are autistic, who have a hard time processing a dysregular lifestyle. They're all displaced. Children who survived COVID on Zoom are now schoolless. So they don't and their friends who would be support system for them are all displaced everywhere. So they're not accessible to them. Parents having to find schools, which are now on Zoom again. So there's all young teenagers who will have their whole important school.
Formative years, right?
On Zoom.
Yeah.
And that's going to really, that's having an effect. That's an ongoing effect. And I have like divorced parents, for example, who live not too far away from each other. Both parents lost their homes. And then I have my own family who lost their homes. And one of my children is a renter, had just moved into a new house near Altadena. And there's so much ash in the hills of there that they don't want to bring their babies into LA. So they don't know, they have a home, but they don't feel safe in the home. So there's all of that. And my son said something to me yesterday. He said, "You know what? I'm getting an MBA in adulthood right now with what's going on." And I said, "Yes, you are," because of how he's, having to handle the family, keeping them safe, a job, and everything else, and the water damage that results from a fire like that.
It's heartbreaking, and you see, TMZ interviewed this real estate guy, realtor, I guess, real estate guy, realtor, who represents high net worth individuals and high value properties. And he was talking about how many of these people in these communities, if their house is left standing, they don't want to be there because they've lost their entire community and the toxins and everything else, of course. And there's, a lot of people don't realize I had a friend who had a house, in Ojai, and then those Ojai fires happened, and their house was fine, but the inside just reeked of smoke and smoke damage, because people don't realize that, all that permeates the dwelling itself. And just talking about how these people are just walking away, or they don't want to live in a neighborhood where it's consistent construction, because, there might be 3 houses on the block that are left out of 300, and they're trying to just figure that out. I mean, I worked on a house, a home renovation show, and we would go to these developments, and we would be in houses that were built next to houses that were being built. It was just a nightmare to sort of navigate even the neighborhood. And there was hundreds of contractors. They're all putting up these houses as fast as they can. And there's, we're shooting in these backyards and these houses. It's like, God, this would suck.
Yeah, I know. Not only that, but there's food trucks at lunch, and they block the traffic.
Yeah,
and then there are so mmany nails on the streets that people are always having flat tires.
Yeah, and there's a lot. There's a lot of things that people don't consider when it comes to rebuilding these communities. Now, I'll play a little excerpt because our president was in town and expressing his opinion in a meeting with Karen Bass, our mayor, who I would say I'm not particularly a fan of, and I don't ever really delve into politics here, but I'm very disappointed in our government right now. But Trump was in town and talking about this, and I want to play this clip because we want to talk about the hazards that are involved, because you have some personal experience with this. So I want to bring this up. Right?
You already have, and the research. I am more worried because I met at least 8 groups of homeowners, and I'm much more worried about the fact that they said it's 18 months exactly, and they were devastated. They want to start now. They want to start removing things. They're not allowed to do it now. And you mentioned hazardous waste. Well, the hazardous waste. What's hazardous waste? I mean, you're going to have to define that. We're going to go through a whole series of questions on determining what's hazardous.
Nope.
I just think you have to allow the people to go on their site and start the process tonight.
And we will.
Okay, good.
You can come back and check.
Last night, 18 months. So if that's not the answer, Mayor Bass, what is the answer? Because that's what we were all told last night.
Well, and let me just tell you that we are going to do everything we can, slashing regulations, expediting everything so that people can begin the process right away. We have the Disaster Recovery Center on Pico and Westwood. We have built.
You and I, when we were discussing earlier, you were sharing, and I was just at the gym this morning, and there's a woman who I know, I see her all the time there, and she was saying, I have somebody staying with me. She's opened up her home to one of her friends whose house burned down in the Palisades. And she was telling me how he's going to the property, and she's going to go with him to help him sort of, scrounge through the rubble to try to find anything. And I'm thinking, and my first question, of course, I said to her, are you guys, is he wearing masks when he goes up there? Is he, taking care of himself? And she's like, no, he's just up there doing it. I thought, she's like, you need a gas mask. And I was like, yes, you do. And, I see, as I said, I run down the bike path there in Santa Monica, and right on that corner where Chautauqua meets PCH, there's the National Guard there. They're allowing people to come in and out. Obviously, they have some sort of procedure that they follow to see if you're in the neighborhood or not. And I see the photographs from the journalist. My friend is a journalist. He's sending me videos of people just going through the rubble. I'm thinking, it's so toxic. I wear my mask when I'm outside, and it was a situation where I was saying to a friend of mine, I run into somebody on the street. You talk about COVID, and they're walking their dog. They've got their mask on. They're like, stay safe. And we're masked up saying stay safe. I'm like, is this some kind of just sick deja vu that we've just entered this time warp?
And then that the president's message didn't help because it gave permission to people to be cavalier about it, including the firefighters who are walking through there maskless, unprotected. And those are very, very fine particles. And I can tell you personally, just from coming to my house right when it was happening, I got an eye infection. And
my eyes were terrible for weeks.
Yeah, and it's just getting better now. And people are getting the novel virus. They're getting really, it's spreading. The air quality has very heavy particles, and they are breathed in along with all the other stuff. Then the other thing that I heard from someone who knows a lot about it and who I would introduce you to interview if you were interested is
absolutely
someone who testifies in court for disputes, and he's a contractor, and he said that it takes, and he's very busy right now, I think he said 8 of his houses that he either worked on or was working on burnt down. And he's driving around, and now, a lot of your listeners probably don't live in LA, but a lot of them do. Traffic is an issue here. And now that these many trucks are coming with loading up with the toxic material, some of which is salvageable. And they're saying that they're covering it up in plastic and then putting them into trucks and covering them up. And they said nicely with a tarp. Well, when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, these trucks have to use the freeway. And I thought, just envision the trucks flying open. Well, guess what? This contractor was suddenly driving on the 10 in his truck, smells this horrible smell and smoke in his cab, and realizes right in front of him is a truck with the tarp.
The debris
didn't get tied down properly and is up. So it's on human error. All this remediation and all these good intentions to clean up is really based on human skill, training, and intentions, which, errors and the S word happens,
Yeah. You can use profanity on this podcast, by the way. It's totally fine. But yeah, and I understand he's appealing to the people who want to get in there and just get stuff done, right? But again, is it safe? And
he's just doing that? I think he's pitting two opinions against each other.
Sure.
And so there are the people that are, and I want to speak to that too, because it's not just an opinion. I have the right to go into my property. It's my property and do what I want with it and do what I want with my health and think of my health the way I want to. There's that opinion. And then there's the other one that says, collectively, so for society, we need to protect the air that everybody breathes. And he is pitting those two against each other. And what I want to say to people that are traumatized is that there's an I, when you think of I, my property, my rights. There's a you're doing this to me. You're taking my rights away. And there's a we. There's what is happening to us? What should we do collectively? And when people are traumatized, when we're traumatized, we think of I first. We think of our survival first. And so this presidential opinion is feeding that, I, and she was trying to say we, but they weren't talking to the same language because of that. And it's hard for humans who are suffering to think collectively.
One of the things that I want to get as a professional, I always say in this program, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a psychologist, I do not work in law enforcement. I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. And but when I have professionals such as yourself and you being a traumatologist, one of the things that I've always talked about, specifically when it was related to my personal trauma, is that I felt like the thing that ultimately led me through that was being of action, right? Okay, what next? What can I do? How can I lead myself through this? What can I focus on? And okay, so my mother's dead, my mother's been killed. I know who did it. I'm going to move through this and just, put these in a row. Right. Is that our natural response to just jump in and just, we want to fix it?
No. First of all, it's a natural impulse to want to survive. But there are different kinds of responses. There's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, and there's fawning or befriending, where you see the guy that's really dangerous, so you inch up to them and make nice to calm down the bear. That's fawning. And so you had this impulse as a boy to do something.
Mm.
And what it caused to you, it caused attachment trauma, because as a child, you didn't have the support you needed and nobody paid attention to you. So that was a secondary trauma, which probably had long-standing effects on you.
Sure.
But the impulse to do something is the definition of whether something is traumatic or not, because there are people who go through two very similar experiences and one is traumatized and one isn't. Why? Because the person that something was happening was able to prevent it, was able to follow that instinct and push, literally, let's say, push it back. Or if you're driving, a car accident is a trauma. You swerve away as the truck is coming at you. You did something, and that protected you. And therefore, your nervous system is not surged with the physiological chemicals that then embed themselves and make you traumatized. My training is in somatic experiencing, and it works with the nervous system neurobiologically and the body to identify where in your body you're holding all that adrenaline that then has to be expressed. And so when you say to do something, what can I do, is you're expelling that extra energy which your body no longer needs to fight, flight, or whatever.
Somebody just wrote in the comments, Sage Blue 02 says, the wise mind versus the emotional mind.
Right. The problem is that that's beautiful, and that's we want the wise mind, but the wise mind has the ability to identify when they're triggered and when they're dysregulated. Being triggered and being dysregulated are not the same things. And when you realize, oh shit, I'm really feeling this. I can't breathe. My heart's beating really fast.
Mm-hmm.
This is affecting me physiologically, for example. Mm-hmm. Then suddenly the choice of what I can do sort of emerges and appears. And then when you act on it, you have that time, that soft space, that spaciousness to become wise in that moment. But when people are in the I survive, I have to survive stage, their wise mind is offline. This is what people need to learn and be very loving about with themselves about. Because when you are in that shock mode of what is happening, you don't think wisely. You're in survival mode, which is a very primitive part of the brain. Mm-hmm. And that primitive part of the brain does not have a very strong executive function. It doesn't know how to think logically. I don't know. I'm sure all of you have experienced this when you're in a fight with somebody, for example, because we don't really have saber-toothed tigers in our world and in our lives. But when you're if somebody's upset with you or in a fight with you, it feels dangerous, and you freeze. You don't know what to do with that moment. That executive function goes offline, and the surge of emotion is all you feel in that moment. And in order to have that wise mind over the emotional mind, it requires training, and that's basically what I do. I teach people to identify with self-compassion, because so many people that are traumatized hate themselves afterwards. Yeah. They beat themselves up for the way they responded, when in fact they couldn't help it because their wise mind was offline. We're built that way in order to put all the adrenaline and energy into our muscles to run or fight. And if we perceive the moment as overwhelming and too much, then we freeze, because then if the saber-toothed tiger is going to bite us, we're not going to feel it because we're dissociated. And it's neurobiologically, we're wired this way. So we can't hate ourselves for it because it's what our bodies and minds do. But you can learn to identify it so you can keep both wisdoms. The body has its own wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So you keep both wise voices in you actively in conversation, and it helps with everything, not just with traumatic situations.
Like cooler heads will prevail.
Right. That's right. And to remember that when you feel overwhelmed, like, oh, where do I start now? Yeah, I don't have a home, I don't have clothes, and now I have to fight the insurance companies or whatever. That's a
whole other thing
of helplessness. But we can't forget to remember what's inspiring, to look around and see that in LA, there are certain trees that are already blooming, or the kindness that someone extended to you. That's inspirational. So you want to also hold on to both things. And that's helpful. That's very helpful.
Yeah. It is. And it's, this is a beautiful place and a beautiful community. And it's just such a shame to see it affected in such a just a tragic way.
It's affected multi-generations because there are, like in Altadena, I know 2 families who the parents lost their home and the children who live nearby lost their home. So that, parents, children, and grandkids lost their home and their community.
Talk to me about the sense of community and how important that is to us, and how that loss can traumatize individuals, whether they're 8 years old or 80.
Yeah, that's such an important topic. I'll share something personal of how I experienced that. When we felt we really need to evacuate now, our friends were in the alphabet streets, so all those houses were being burned down. So they left and went to a hotel, and they said, "Listen, this hotel was 20% occupied, and a short time ago, and now it's getting full. If you want to get a hotel, come now." So we went, and we ended up evacuated for 10 days with those people and with this couple and friends. And we had breakfast together every morning. And we also tried to, as we shared this together,
Yeah.
And the roller coaster of emotions of we have a home, we don't have a home, the implications of having a home when nobody else has a home on my street, and everything, and the emotional up and down. And then we also went to dinner at night to a nice place in this new neighborhood that we didn't live in. And that camaraderie meant everything. Like I always say, misery needs company in order to feel tolerable,
Yeah.
It needs it. It needs that company. We had company in our suffering, and that made all the difference. And so when people are in their communities and their communities is gone, they're really uprooted, and that has profound. Like, where do you start doing something? To your point earlier, what do you do first? Parents have to do something for their kids. And but kids are always incredibly loving to their parents, and that feeds them too, so it's everywhere. That togetherness is everywhere, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I had a client in town when all this happened, and I live here in Santa Monica. Right off my deck, I watched all the fires. I saw when it went to Brentwood. I ride my bike up in Mandeville Canyon and West Ridge Trailhead and all that. And I just watched it go across the mountains and then back. And then, I mean, I was traumatized. And I remember I was working with my client. She was staying at Shutters by the beach. In the morning when she arrived, there was like 30% capacity. By the time I went back there, the hotel was full of people and dogs and children and everything. And all these people evacuated. I remember getting the next day I got on an elevator with this gentleman who was, in his probably early to mid 80s. And I just said to him, and he was being jovial, and we were laughing about the elevator or something wasn't working. And I said to him, are you here for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And he goes, the wrong reasons. He's like, we lost our house last night. And I just remember thinking to myself, this man's at the end of his life. And here he is having to deal with this. But as I'm thinking that, he's talking to me, he's like, I have my grandchildren here. I have my children. I have my family. I have my friends here. Like, it was this sense of community at this hotel. Yeah. And he felt reassured by that. I mean, obviously in that moment, he's, obviously reeling from what happened, probably still not even processing it, I'd imagine.
No, but they had family together, and that made it like an adventure too.
Yeah.
And I kept running into, we had celebrities in the hotel
where
we were, and I kept running into them, and we kept checking in with each other. There was this camaraderie. And at the hotel, the hotel personnel union, it opened up a ballroom and provided dog food, cat food, toys, and then for children activities. And then in the ballroom, there are clothing for adults, children of all ages, and stuff that people needed. It was everybody, so gracious. And when I walked into that room, it just felt like a hug. It felt, and and you talking to this man in the elevator, it was a good thing. You showed him you cared about him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that you're aware of his situation being there.
Yeah.
Or being interested in him in any way.
Well, for sure. Absolutely. How could you not? How could you not be? You know what I mean? I think it's, I'm sure some people are solipsistic and don't care. I wondered about that.
Everybody, I took photographs because it was so salient. All the carts, the hotel carts with all this stuff.
Yeah.
There weren't any very nice suitcases. They were all plastic bags filled with stuff. It was a pretty nice hotel, but there was plastic bags because people just threw things in plastic bags and threw them in their cars. And in Altadena, the fire was in 10 minutes. It was so fast there. It was like they called it a fire storm there, not just a fire storm. It came really fast.
Yeah. I haven't had any experience with, that side of town because obviously we're over here, but, I was an East Sider for years. I remember the station fire, I think is what it was. The one that looked like there was a nuclear weapon that went off in the city. The mushroom cloud was like 80,000 feet high or something. That was insane. That was, I think, in 2010, 2009, something like that. And, I didn't realize because I always think of Altadena as JPL and San Marino and things like that, like more affluent neighborhoods and people, and of course, generational wealth or, generational homes at least. And, but I didn't realize that there was a large African-American population, Latino population that are new residents there that had just purchased homes.
Yeah.
And are now, that's a significant investment for anyone, especially nowadays, to buy a home in California. And
it's gone. And many of the people didn't have insurance because in California, several insurance companies left. And so you can't get insurance. And there are now people organizing to create their own neighborhood insurance. And in Altadena, there are There are all kinds of socioeconomic situations, including people who live in the hills in very nice average homes, right on the foothills where it's a really nice quality of life. You can walk your dog on trails in the mountains. But they've had so many fires there. So I don't know. Many people are talking there about not rebuilding. And also not being allowed to rebuild because it's too fire dangerous.
So I wasn't aware of that. Are they talking about having these communities, not allowing these communities to rebuild in these areas?
Not communities, but certain streets, certain areas. And there are some very interesting articles in the LA Times about that, including building materials. Like I know my friend's house, their garden, their hillside burned down and stopped at the house because it was a newly built house with fire retardant materials, and it stopped. They didn't burn down. Of course, they had a water damage in the basement, so that's another issue because it produces mold. So by the time they get in there, who knows if it's salvageable. But building materials that are designed to, survive these kind of heat might give insurance companies incentives to insure. But if it's so close to the Edison towers where they keep, igniting, they don't know yet. And there are people who are, like you said, later in life, and they don't have the energy to do that.
No.
And then, do you get your money back? So you can move on, so you can buy something else. Who knows? So the trauma is sort of like you're surfing waves,
Yeah.
Wave crashes and ends, but then there's another wave of trauma, which is now, will I get money to start new, and where and how and who's, and what do I have to do? These are all trigger helplessness, which is a traumatic feeling.
A lot of these people I don't think are going to be able to rebuild in the neighborhoods that they were in.
No.
I was reading an article in the LA Times where this young guy, had bought a house on, Billionaire's Beach, bought it for something like 25 million or something like that, and was fixing it up and was going to sell it for like 44 million. Put $5 million into it, and that burned down, and he was only insured up to 3 million.
Yeah,
I mean and obviously these people are still having to pay their mortgages too.
Yes,
in a lot of these cases.
Yes, and if even let's say in a best scenario, the insurance company covers, the house value, to rebuild will cost more because the city's going to require these retardant materials, which cost more money. Labor is going to be in demand.
High demand, yeah.
Go up, and labor is not always available.
Yeah.
So and people are not well trained. So it's like a ball of.
Yeah, it's a fireball. It is just insurance companies not wanting to pay is just the start of this, and a lot of people are seeing that.
But some insurances are paying for things like hotel stays and cleanup and whatever. But then there comes the real estate question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where you're in Brentwood,
mm-hmm.
and your house was okay.
Yes. And I came home and I changed the filters in my air conditioner, and they were filthy. Mm-hmm. And I also got some individual air filters in the various rooms because for maybe 10 days afterwards, I could smell the smoke.
Yeah.
Well, it's even been 10 days, but since the fire stopped, I could still smell in certain rooms, I could smell the smoke. And we had time to take some of the artwork out and some photographs out, and I haven't brought them back yet. I don't feel yet like I'm like it's okay. I don't feel it's okay yet, you know?
Yeah.
And we have a generator, so we came back, but nobody on our street had any light, so it was really eerie and dark and stinky. And
because they cut the power, correct, in Brentwood to avoid these fires.
Yes. Yeah. And and I see people walking with, the special masks that they used to wear in World War II.
Oh yeah, the gas masks.
The gas masks. They look like that. And a guy saw him walking his dog with goggles and the mask. And
I don't blame him.
Yeah, and you can say, well, big deal, I don't see it, but our human eyes don't see micro particles, but our lungs will take it in. And I think it would be really interesting to hear what Maui is. I think people are getting sick in Maui 2 years later from that horrible fire, which was similar to Palisades and Altadena, where the whole community got razed down. For example, a lot of the buildings in Pacific Palisades, for you listeners who are not from here, is such a lovely, desired neighborhood because it's by the ocean and you can see the ocean, and it's just, the climate is not as hot in the summer. It's just very nice. And it had a really lovely community. However, it's an old community, and it was like Pacific Palisades High School, and many of the civic buildings were built 50, 60, 70 years ago, and they all have asbestos. And so that's all there. And so when you don't, all those little buildings were not cute. And the one that's newer, the Caruso building, the center that's newer, survived because it has the newer fire retardant materials. And so near there, the air quality is not safe, even though you don't see it. And, you stir up the ashes to look for your things. And what are you doing? You don't, you need to know. Even though I don't love Karen Bass, I'm with her. You have to know and educate the people so they are taking their risks in their own hands. Otherwise, the city is going to be accused of not taking care of their citizens.
Again.
Yeah, again. And so you can't have a federal representative who isn't from here come in and just stir shit to please the people that want their stuff back because they're in that I'm on a survive mode. It is, you want to engage with the wise brain of the people and the communities. And it's a challenge. It's hard to make anybody do anything, isn't it? I'm so glad that a public servant.
Oh man, no.
Because I would want them to do it my way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good time not to be a politician in Southern California. That's for sure.
Right.
What are some, and I want to get into some of the work that you're going to be doing to help the community speed along, but what are some ways that, look, I myself watched this whole thing play out from right here. And from my deck over the days, I saw the fire when it started. I thought, oh geez. And then I watched it on that first night, just the whole hillside was on fire. It looked like, and it was. And I was very close to the border of the evacuation warning zone. I had a go bag packed. My neighbors like, we're gonna have to get out of here. Because fire spreads so fast.
Yeah.
And people, I don't think, understand that, how quickly it can get out of hand. But I watching that just play, and I remember my client left, and so I was shooting and I was dealing with her. But when she left, I think that Friday, I just fell. Everything was just so heavy.
Yeah.
Right. What are some ways when, and I mean, this obviously is ubiquitous and can apply to anything, but ways to really process trauma out of your system when you go through something like this, ways to cope and feel better.
Yeah. That's, I was hoping, didn't want to leave today not giving some tips.
No. We've been doing gloom for a long time. We got to give some positivity here.
Yeah. But I want to say too, that what made it really overwhelming is that it wasn't just in Palisades where it started. Then it spread to Malibu. Then suddenly it sprung up on clearly across the opposite side of the city.
Yes.
And it was like everywhere. And that's when people started feeling the apocalyptic nature of the experience, where it was way bigger than just, I'll pack my bag and run over there. It's like there is no safe place. I have friends who went to their friends to stay the night, who had to leave Palisades, and then they had to evacuate. All of them had to evacuate because it wasn't safe. So we were running away. And that I will always say, identify when you're feeling overwhelmed. There's in trauma work, I always teach that there is a window of tolerance for what you can experience in your body physically, where you can still keep your wise brain and feel the emotions, but still have the ability to think clearly with your executive function. But when things pop outside that window of tolerance, then the thinking brain shuts down, it goes offline. It has an agreement with the emotional overwhelmed brain that says, okay, you've got it. You go into survival mode. We can't think our way out of this, or talk our way out of this, or symbolize our way out of this, or use metaphor or wit, because this is about life or death. So we are at a disadvantage, and it's really important to be able to know when that is for you. And it's different for everybody. What is traumatizing to one person is not traumatizing to somebody else. Some people hold on to old memories much longer than others. Other people just want to move on and succeed. So when I teach this, it's very important to know yourself and to accept yourselves for wherever you are. And the way you enter that knowing, it's a different part of the brain knowing, is through the breath, which of course is hard to breathe here right now, but
that it is.
But you still have to do it. And your body is one autonomic nervous system function that lets you know you're alive. So with this breath, remind yourself, I am all right now. I am alive, or I didn't get burned. My house got burned. I didn't get burned. Find something that is true, that doesn't hurt, and keep breathing. That's the first thing to reestablish that conversation between the emotional brain and the cognitive, intellectual, I call it executive functioning brain. That's the first thing. Without that, I can give you the 10 steps to blah, blah, and it wouldn't mean anything and you couldn't do it. It's very body oriented. It's feel your feet on the ground. If you're standing, feel your butt sitting on the chair. Really feel it. And I always say, take 3 inhales and 3 exhales, because the first one, you just realize how much you haven't been breathing. So the other 2 really settle you into that nice autonomic nervous system flow, and feel your feet. Because when we are in that I am scared, we're in our heads. We're in our terrified heads, and we don't feel our bodies. So you want to get back into the body. And then the second thing is to find someone to be with you, you know. And it's very important to have a witness to your experience. That's why therapy and therapists work, because, or a good friend, or a priest, because we are your witness. We are witnessing your experience, and reminding you, take a breath. And specifically, I'll refine my statement there. Usually when you are really in a traumatic shock and reaction, you are not actually exhaling. So when I say breathe or take 3 breaths, what I really mean is, specifically, the technique is exhale first. And then let your body take in the air that it knows how to do. The body knows how to breathe for you. And then you let the body exhale. It knows how to exhale for you. And that, I mean, if you're doing it, I don't, do you notice, like, try it.
I've been doing it the whole time. It's amazing. Yeah. And you just ground yourself.
It's like medicine. It's like a tranquilizer that you can do on the spot. And then, there are other levels of focus. But the first one is to attend to the scared, terrified little person in you. And that is very body oriented, just like babies and children. They need a hug, You need to hug yourself in that way. And the breath will do that as an entry point to the other things. Later on, like you developed this ability to think, what can I do? I'm not satisfied with this moment as things are here. What do I visualize as where I want to be? That comes later. But first you have to calm down that scared little part of you. And which we all have. I was so happy that I had my husband and my friends around me. And then the news kept getting worse and worse, like more and more family, friends were losing it. But we were holding each other, we were all hearing each other's voices. It's very powerful, and taking really good care of yourself and moving slowly. This is not a time to move fast and hold on to your plan, your goal, your to-do list, because that to-do list was just, there's a new to-do list now. So to cling to those to-do lists is not dealing with that scared little person in you. And that's not going to serve you well when you have to make a decision.
Yeah, you and I, when we were speaking earlier today, you talked about this idea of when you attach to permanence, you create your own problems.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because that's a perfect example. It's like my to-do list. That's a permanent thing that I have to act on. And that's about control. But when you remember what we said, when the fires are sprouting all over your city, you think, what the hell is going on here? You're not in control. In fact, nobody knows what's happening. And so you can't be in control. And to set yourself up with that impossible job of being in control is only like reprimanding that little scared person in you. And that's not going to make that little scared person in you feel better or stop crying or tantruming or whatever. So it requires a lot of slowing down, which is so hard for people, because we are so used to being computer fast, right? As fast as our internet gives us. And really, our nervous system is much slower. It's over 300,000 years old. Our nervous system, which is really running the show, whether we like it or not, tell that to all the tech bros, it's really our nervous system. We have to honor that pace, that rhythm.
Yeah, we do. So slowing down, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
I mean, all these are great tips.
Yeah, and including, I don't know, when is the show over? I forgot.
Oh, I mean, we can still talk. We're continuing to talk. We're good.
I was mentioning that there are different kinds of traumas, and attachment trauma is relational trauma, and that pops up when people are under stress too, and they act out on each other, where they're acting how they feel. They're acting that out instead of remembering how they're feeling. That's why it's so important to know how you're feeling, that self-reflective muscle. Because otherwise you act it out in compensatory ways, and which you then regret,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talked about attachment trauma earlier in the program. It seems like every time I have anyone who is in the psychological field or the therapy field, they're always they're always like, Collier, you may have some attachment trauma that's from childhood, and I talk about that a lot. And yeah,
well,
absolutely.
but also, I mean, yes, you have a traumatic memory, but how your life was after that could have healed a lot of that. If you had a loving adoptive family and you have a new reference points of how people can be good to each other too, and good to you, that cancels it out. And that's why trauma work works, because you're not stuck with what happened to you. If you can add good experiences to your life, then that can dominate and quiet that memory.
What about when you're talking about memories? People who I often remember a lot of things that I wish I didn't remember of conversations I had decades ago, or why did I wear that to the prom, or why did I say that to this person? Is that part of a trauma response in a way? Hanging on to these memories of things, why did I say that? Why did I do that? And it's like, why am I even remembering this? It happened 25 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right. So what I would say to you, if you were sitting with me working, I would say, well, how are you feeling right now? Like what is the feeling behind that memory?
Interesting.
In this moment, remembering that prom and that outfit, how do you feel thinking about that?
I mean, I feel that I thought that Tommy Hilfiger vest looked really cool at the time, but
today, right now, are you cringing? Are you going, oh God, like this?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure I was just sort of being hyperbolic when I said that, but in a lot of ways, but yeah, there's certain things that I can just relate to myself. And this is all the stuff I talk about that my audience, finds very helpful, is my own experience of just remembering certain, like, why did I do that? That was so stupid. Or why, or hanging on to these memories of, things maybe my father. I mean, every time I go to wash my car, for example, at a car wash place, and you're just the do-it-yourself type thing, self-serve. And I'm washing the top of my car, and I think about something that my father said to me when I was 9 years old, showing me how to wash the car and telling me I'm stupid for not washing the top of the car this certain way and spraying hose down, and how angry or abusive he was to me about that. And it always sticks in my, every single time I think about it, and I try to wash it away, no pun intended, when I'm in the moment. But it's something I always think about it. I always think about him saying, that's not the top of Mrs. Lowry's fat head or something. It's just, I remember him saying this, and it just sticks in my mind. How do you sort of process and eliminate those thoughts?
Well, again,
they're attached to a trauma response.
Identifying the thought in that moment, saying, oh, wow, that's a critical voice that's still in my head. What can and have a conversation with that critical voice? What, is it true? I always say that when I get my critical voices, and believe me, I have them too, I just cringe. I say, is this true? Is that true that I'm not washing my car in this moment? I am here. Again, breath, feel your feet on the pavement, washing the car, feel the rest of your body. That's a memory of how I was spoken to. Is it true that I'm not washing the car right? No, it's not true. So you separate past from present.
Yeah.
A lot, but it's different in different times. Sometimes, if you're remembering, something comes back up to you. I have a recurring memory always with my mom, and it's because I regret something that I said, and now she's not here. And so I say, oh, that was then. I know how I was feeling then. And you can say I was little boy, and that really hurt me when my dad spoke to me like that then.
Mm-hmm.
I'm remembering that hurt, but here I am washing my car, and I don't need to be speaking to me that way right now, that critical voice. And when I hear my critical voice, I realize that underneath that is that I loved my mom, and I wish I could have said something loving when she was dying instead of something nasty. And so you want to identify, because every time it's not always the same thing. Once it's regret, other times it's hurt in the past, and then you fast forward to the present. Feel your feet, feel your butt on the seat. What is true right now? And in that moment, you showing curiosity about yourself and your little vulnerable person feels loving, and it separates that past and brings you to the present. It really, really works. It's like magic.
I love that. That's a great tip. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of my listeners would relate to this, and viewers. Even things I was involved in a relationship recently that was, the person would say very hurtful things a lot to me. And it was a very interesting scenario when they'd be very loving and affectionate, and then they would just turn on a dime, which was similar to my father when I was, growing up, before he was incarcerated. And I remember, just it being, and I hate using this word triggering, but it was triggering in a way, because I thought, this is, why am I'm in this relationship with this person who I'm very kind to, I'm very loving to, and who says they love me and who is affectionate to me, and then immediately can flip this switch and say something that is so hurtful or so negative and so, for lack of a better word, abusive. And those things stick in your head. They're like barbs.
Yeah.
And I think
they hurt because they triggered specifically your memory of your being hurt that way by someone you trusted and blindsided you. Really, he was your protector, and yet he attacked not just you, but ultimately your mom. So it was a betrayal. The worst kind of trauma in human experience, in my opinion, is betrayal, because we need each other. Remember what I said. It's the other people that help comfort ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If those same people then betray you and blindside you, it is very wounding. And if you have a childhood experience of that, hooking up with somebody like that is a familiar dynamic. So it's a natural thing to choose a partner like that because it's familiar. And it's very important to, again, identify the emotion you're feeling, hurt, and not to react with anger in return, tit for tat, aggression back, to stop it, but to say, ouch. And because then you give yourself the opportunity to detach from that relationship ultimately. And I want to get something very clear. There's a difference between being triggered, which I think of define it as being triggered from the outside, right? Some event happens and it triggers you.
Okay.
And identifying that you are dysregulated. Dysregulated is physiologic. It's a physiological experience of your shortness of breath. Can't see. You can hear that they're talking to you, but you can't make out the message. Has that ever happened to you when you're really like? That's what happens in relational trauma. Is you can hear they're yelling at you, but you can't make out what they're saying because it's so overwhelming and triggering. That's when the trigger dysregulates you and you can't hear or see properly. The vision becomes blurry. Your heart starts beating really fast. You don't feel your feet and hands, or they get really tingly. These are physiological responses that let you know you're dysregulated. And why is that important? It's critical because you then can override that dysregulation by reminding yourself to breathe, feeling some part of your body that feels okay to feel.
Uh-huh.
And then you realize that, oh, I am separate from that person. I am not at their mercy of their words or anything. I mean, we can have another session about that, but.
No, but I know that it connects a lot with my audience. I want to, I want to get into what you're doing now. You have something that you're getting ready to launch to really help the community thrive and survive and move past the trauma of the fires and really come together and heal. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm going to be offering a group for people, probably mostly in LA, right, and surrounds who survived the fires, are still surviving the sequela of it. And they can go on my website and there's a contact information. They can say if they want to join the group, and it's going to be a Zoom group, and we can just provide that shared community, that misery, the company to the misery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll have the details, I'll respond with the details because there's a need. I'm getting a lot of that.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I love that you're doing that to offer the support group. And that's amazing. That's amazing. So thank you. Elizabeth Rona, thank you so much for joining the program. I greatly appreciate you. I want to get one last thing from you. But today, joining me is Elizabeth Rona, a licensed marriage and family therapist and somatic experiencing practitioner who specializes in trauma recovery and stress resilience. And she is also a traumatologist. And she has been gracious enough to share her knowledge and her experience surviving the fires here in Los Angeles and the surrounding communities. So my community here is called Mover Nation. And Mover Nation is all about moving past challenges and looking ahead with purpose. If my listeners could take just one lesson from you and your journey or your expertise to help them out, what would you want it to be?
Well, the fact that we're all here together means that we've made it to this moment. And that's a really good thing. And then I would say that they're all movers. They're movers and makers. And to always remember that there's more than what's hurting. There's always more than what's hurting.
Like, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining the program. I will have links to to Elizabeth's website, where if you are interested in this program that she is offering, you can sign up or you can reach out to her. I'm so grateful to Angel Iscovich, who connected us as well. I thank you for sharing your experience and your expertise with my audience.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice to speak with you.
Nice to speak with you as well.
Bye, Collier.
I hope you enjoyed today's program with Elizabeth Rona. She is a traumatologist and licensed marriage and family therapist. I want to say thank you to all our channel subscribers, channel members, Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review, rate and review. If you are here on the channel, please subscribe, like, do all of the things. On that note, Mover Nation, we get through another one. Thank you so much to everyone who's contributed to today's program. Super stickers, super chats. I greatly appreciate it. And again, please, if you are interested, please look up Elizabeth's website. It is in the show notes of today's episode. I cannot encourage that enough. And please pray for the community here in Los Angeles. And speaking of prayers, we have one channel member who is going through some tough times right now. Cat Loves Catskills, Kathleen Welsh. I ask that you please keep her and her family in your prayers. So, Mover Nation, on that note, as I always like to say, hey, here's the outro. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support today's program, please click the links in the description of the show notes of today's episode. And if you like this video, check out this one right here or this one right here. And don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps with the algorithm. On that note, I'm Collier Landry. I'll see y'all on the next one. Good girl, Marisol. Good girl.